All right, hello, welcome back to Unqualified Analysis. I am your host, Caleb. You can find me on the Twitters at CalebVUA. And you know what? I'm just going to keep that right down there in the bottom right. Maybe it's on this side. I don't know. One of those two bottom corners will have my at, assuming that the video file doesn't corrupt this time. Apologies to the people who watch on YouTube. There wasn't one last week because my recording just crapped out right in the middle of recording. I think I got about 25 minutes in before it completely gave up on me. Hopefully, knock on wood, I'll have a video file this week. But yeah, you can follow me on the Twitters at CalebVUA, and that'll be on the screen, and it'll be down in the description as well. Today, I realized, you know what? Hold on. One thing, fun fact, almost said one thing I learned this week. That's the end of the episode. Fun fact, the environment inside of an airplane alters the way you taste and smell food. Sweet food. I said this at the end of the last episode. I do apologize. I apologize. I'm a big dumb dipshit. I do apologize. I'm going to erase that right now so that I can't. I just can't do it. I just can't go back in and reread the exact same fact. I apologize. Hand up. Accountability. We really prize accountability on this podcast, and hand up. I messed up. That's on me. Fun fact though, the most popular hat worn by cowboys was the bowler hat, not the traditional cowboy hat that you see from Stetson. I believe the first one from Stetson came out in the mid to late 1890s, I want to say, and there was a lot of cowboys going on before that, and they wore bowler hats. So don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by popular culture. It was the bowler hat, not the cowboy hat that you know and love, that was the most popular hat among cowboys. All right, so this week, I'm going to try and keep my voice down because I feel like I'm on the verge of losing my voice, and as someone who spends a good portion to most of the day on the phones, I need to preserve my voice and do it as best as I can. So I'm going to be trying to be a little bit more chill today. I'm not going to be quite so much projecting my voice. I'm just going to be talking at this volume if I can help it. Sometimes I just get excited and I just start going for it. But I'm going to try my best to not get too excited. Try to be excited without raising my voice. That's going to be a tough thing to swing here, but I'm going to try my best. With it. That being said, today we have got a treat for y'all. I did a little bit of math, and I looked at, how far away is opening day of the NFL season, and you know what? I did the math, and 8 weeks in the future, 9 weeks, I suppose, we're going to be having opening night. So you know what that means. We do the same thing every single year going into the football season. It's division previews time, folks, which is fortuitous because there ain't shit that is going on in the news right now. Not a damn thing. It is the deadest of dead periods at the moment, unless you enjoy watching mid-regular season baseball, but this isn't a baseball podcast. This is a football podcast. And so 8 weeks out, 9 weeks out, 8.5, we'll say, give or take. Let's take a look at what we are thinking as far as the season. Same thing as we always do. Just going to work my way around the compass here, starting with the East, then going south, then going west, then going north, AFC, then NFC. Is that because the Vikings are in the NFC North and I'm saving the one I care about most for last? I can't deny that. I can't deny that that's a fact because it absolutely is. But we're starting here today with the AFC East after I get to one outstanding headline. Not outstanding in its content, just outstanding in the fact that we haven't talked about it just yet. Then we're going to get straight into the AFC East. So I'm going to take a swig of this caffeinated beverage. Already had, 4.5 cups of coffee today. Still tired as all hell, so we're just mainlining caffeine until I eventually pass out at the end of the day. But I need this. I need this right now. So I'm going to take a swig of this. Man, that is good. Nothing like classic Coke. Nothing like classic Coke. All right, so excuse me, I had to sniffle real quick. I apologize to anyone who had to hear that. It is what it is. That's just kind of what the body does. You know, it builds up mucus, and now we're here. My brain is jello, so I apologize ahead of time. Might be a rough episode. I think we're gonna have a good time though. I think we're just gonna have a good time. Didn't miss anything last week to my knowledge, so good on me. You know, pat myself on the back there. You did a good job, Caleb. One headline really just dropped today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had any headlines. That's how dead it's been. Excuse me, in the NFL sphere. Steelers cornerback Cam Sutton, formerly of the Lions before he was cut following a domestic violence incident, has been suspended 8 games for said domestic violence incident. So yeah, the Steelers will be without Cam Sutton for the first half of the season, a little under half of the season. They'll have him for the last 9 games, but that seems to be pretty much resolved as far as the on-field stuff. I think I don't remember if he reached a plea deal or not with the domestic violence charges, but as far as the on-field stuff, as far as the NFL stuff, that is all sorted now. So the suspension has been handed down. Unless this is like a Ray Rice situation where a video comes out later and the NFL is like, okay, it's one thing to hear the allegations, it's another thing to actually see the video, and then they, suspend him indefinitely, do that whole thing. It should be pretty much resolved on that front. So, hell of a player. I mean, hell of a player. Can't deny that. Maybe not the person that you want around your family at a given function. And I guess this is still, I probably should have looked up whether the charges were pled to or not. But you got to get a suspension for 8 games. There's something there. There is absolutely something there. So, that's kind of where we're at with Cam Sutton. They're still going to have a good player down the stretch in a position where the Steelers really need him. So, good pickup. The NFL sphere is not known for their moral compass necessarily. So on the field, good pickup. You just hope you have a strong culture within the locker room, which is the Steelers. They probably do. That's one thing. Really, the one outstanding headline that we had to look at here real quick. Again, not really outstanding in the character of the headline, just outstanding in the fact that we hadn't talked about it just yet, but we talked about it now. So with that said, let's get into our first division preview of this offseason as we ramp up towards the NFL opening night in Kansas City. It's going to be electric. It's going to be awesome, and I simply can't wait. But as far as the AFC East goes, that is our first division. And we're gonna start from the top here in just a second. I have to look something up real quick, so I'm just gonna do a quick cut. If I can ever find the cursor, there it is. We're just gonna do a quick cut, and then I'll be right back in just a second. Bang! All right, had to look at some stuff right quick. So yeah, had to do some a little bit of legwork just to make sure I'm not contradicting anything whatsoever. So yeah, we're good. We're in this. Just got to pull up our first team here, and we're just going down the division standings order as is tradition. So what we have right at the top is the Buffalo Bills. They were the winners of the AFC East last year. Had a turbulent isn't the right word. They just had a lot of turnover on their roster, which a lot of big names, not a whole lot of on-field impact and production from those names that left, with the exception of Stephon Diggs. And even Stephon Diggs, the second that Joe Brady took over, he was kind of relegated, pushed to the side in the offense. So it was a lot of aging players, a lot of big salaries, but for the most part, kind of just shedding salary cap for the most part. If I say for the most part one more time, I'm gonna smack myself across the face. But we're not gonna cross that. We're not gonna cross that threshold. I guarantee you. But looking at their offseason, in the draft, as far as players that I think should be impactful, Obviously, Keon Coleman, he's slated as their number 2 wide receiver right now. I think behind Khalil Shakir, I want to say 2 or 3. I can't remember. We're going to look at their depth chart here in a moment, so we're going to find out. Outside of that, though, Cole Bishop, safety, should be in line for a lot of playing time this year with the exodus of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, if I'm not mistaken. Also, Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle, he should, out of Duke, he should probably be in the rotation as well. I'm going through the draft, by the way. I don't know if I said that going into this, but this is kind of, recapping the Buffalo Bills draft here. Ray Davis, I think he's going to feature prominently in that backfield rotation. He was their 4th round pick out of Kentucky, running back, especially mid-round running backs. You can almost pencil them in. If they're any sort of good, you can just pencil them in for a good share of the carries, and I think that's the case in this time around. Cedric Van Pran, watch out for that guy. Cedric Van Pran Granger, a lot of names for Cedric Van Pran Granger. But 5th round, center, kind of an area of need for the team. I could easily, Cedric Van Pran Granger played a ton of snaps at Georgia and was part of a dominant offensive line, kind of the quarterback of that offensive line, frankly. I think there's a good chance you see him end up taking that starting role at some point. I really like that pick for them in the 5th round. Outside of that, you love to be pleasantly surprised by some of the guys, but anything like 5th round or later, unless it just kind of jumps off the page, you don't necessarily expect anything too major from them in year 1 unless, injuries force them into the lineup, so on and so forth. So those 5 players that I just went through right there, I think could be impact players this year for them. All that told, though, let's take a look at their depth chart. So right now, for the Bills, obviously Josh Allen is the QB1. Duh. At the very worst, he's like the number 3 quarterback in the NFL. Really very worst, he's top 5. A lot of people have him at number 2. I would probably put him right there. Joe Burrow coming off the injury, I'm not sure about. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is in a league of his own, but Josh Allen has been fantastic, especially since he started, checking it down a little bit more, not necessarily relying on his insane arm talent for every single throw. Just fit it in there. Accuracy improved, all that sort of stuff. We know who Josh Allen is. I don't need to belabor that point. Running back room, really deep running back room, actually. They've got James Cook, the starter, obviously. Not the greatest receiving back, which is where I think Ray Davis could find his way into the mix here. I do think Ray Davis is going to I think it's going to be 50-50 by the end of the year between James Cook and Ray Davis. But even behind Ray Davis, they got Ty Johnson, who is solid for a 3rd string. Usually, I can't remember where he was at last year. I think he was with the Jets, something along those lines. But really featured prominently in running back rotations in the past. Solid running back rotations at that. So having him as your 3rd option could do a whole lot worse than Ty Johnson there. So I love their backfield. Wide receiver core, better than I really thought they would be coming into this whole thing. Keon Coleman is the 2nd wide receiver. Khalil Shakir is the number 1. Curtis Samuel is the number 3 behind Keon Coleman right now. So the top line doesn't look fantastic, but you go out, you pick up Mac Hollins in free agency, who I think is a really solid player. Not a number 1 type of receiver. I don't think they really have a true number 1 type of wide receiver on this team, but a guy that can get you some good, solid reps on the outside. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you don't want him as your number 3 or number 2 like he was with the Chiefs, but he's a good deep threat. If he can, hold on to the damn ball, he's got a habit of getting open deep. He's a speedy guy. He's a bigger receiver. I like him as a rotational sort of option. Chase Claypool is there. So is KJ Hamler. But the point of this whole thing is really they go 5 deep with solid rotational wide receivers. And even beyond that, maybe KJ Hamler can show you something. I've completely given up on Chase Claypool, but hey, maybe KJ Hamler can step in there if you need him to and get some good reps. Again, there's not really a true number 1, but they're just deep. And when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, I think that's deep is just all you need, pretty much. Like, I think Khalil Shakir, maybe he's not going to win you a whole lot of matchups deep in the playoffs. He's shown if you put him in the slot, he'll win one-on-ones and move the chains for you, which is really something that you need in the postseason for sure. And again, with Josh Allen, if you got an elite quarterback, depth is truly all you need. So I like the makeup of this wide receiver core. It seems a little duplicative at points. I mean, obviously, Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir kind of play a similar type of style. Jury's out on Keon Coleman. The 40 times scares me. I hope he's good. He's an incredibly entertaining personality, but it's kind of a wait and see sort of mode. Drafted him number 1 pick in the 2nd round, so you got high expectations for him, especially in a deep receiver class. But I'm still waiting and seeing on him. I love his jump ball ability. Thought he was a monster at FSU this past season, and really solid at Michigan State the years prior to that. But I'm kind of in a wait and see mode. I do really like the makeup of this receiver core, though, just because with the depth. Love the depth on this team at wide receiver. Almost dropped my phone, but it's fine. Okay, so, and then at tight end, of course, you got Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid is going to be taking the lion's share of snaps on the passing downs. Dawson Knox, better blocker. I'm looking for them to kind of do more of what was, promised in the beginning of last season. It kind of fell off the rails, but it was supposed to be Dalton Kincaid getting all sorts of passing snaps, catching all sorts of passes, and then Dawson Knox kind of doing the dirty work, being a solid second tight end, good option just in case Kincaid goes down in the receiving game. I think they're going to be emphasizing that a little bit more this year, especially with Dalton Kincaid going into year 2. I think he's going to have a big leap. Tight end in year 1 is just such a hard position to come in and be a baller. There's tight end almost more than any other position outside of quarterback. There is just a little bit of a growing period in that first year where you just very rarely see guys, come onto the scene, be just fantastic from day one. I think this year you're going to be seeing a lot of what the Dalton Kincaid hype was coming in. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of caught passes. I think him and Josh Allen are going to have a major connection. And adding Dalton Kincaid in with that receiving core, I really love this receiver group. I think it's deeper than what they've had in previous years, just augmenting it through free agency, through the draft picks kind of coming up like Dalton Kincaid. Again, cannot stress enough, I really like this receiving core right now. Then we look at the offensive lines. Deion Dawkins, been there for a minute. He is still there at left tackle after signing a big extension. David Edwards at left guard, Connor McGovern at center. Cedric Van Pran right behind him, but Connor McGovern is still there at center. Osiris Torrance, their 2nd-round pick last year, is slotting in at right guard. And then at right tackle, we have got Spencer Brown. I'm iffy on the offensive line. I think they've got some good run blockers in the middle. I think that's something that you can kind of hang your hat on for sure. Even if McGovern doesn't pan out and Van Pran comes in, I think still really solid run blockers in the middle. Pass blocking, we'll see. You get a little bit of leeway when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen. I would kind of just put the Bills' offensive line at they're floating right there around average. They're right around the Mendoza line. They're nothing special. But when you got receivers that can get open quick and underneath like they do in the receiving core, I think it matters a little bit less, especially when you've got just a monster catching snaps in Josh Allen. So it's a little bit of leeway there, but overall I'd say they're about they're right around average as an offensive line. As an offense, this should be easily a top 10 offense. If the rushing game continues the trend that it had towards the end of last season, and they get some balance in that offense, I think they should be right up there with the best offenses in the league, probably pushing top 5 when it's all said and done, just by virtue of having a deep receiving core, okay enough offensive line, and a quarterback that is one of the best in the entire league. Top 3 at the very worst, I would say. So that's where I'm looking at with the offensive side of the ball. Offensive line, a little bit of a question mark, but not enough of a question mark for me to knock them down the rankings. I think this is going to be another really solid year for that offense. Defensively, had a little bit of turnover here, but at left defensive end, still Greg Rousseau over there. Right defensive end, AJ Epinesa. In the interior, we have got Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. obvious sort of concern at the edge rusher position, but they were able to kind of manufacture some pressure last season with Von Miller kind of falling off a cliff. He is still on this team. He's just no longer starting because he was just so bad last year. So bad. Not good at all. I apologize to that man, but the eyes tell you something, and the eyes weren't telling me good things about old Von Miller there. So you worry about the pass rush. You got a bunch of solid players across the board. Made some solid draft picks. Basically all these players were draft picks. I can't remember if Daquan Jones was drafted by the Bills, but Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa, and Greg Rousseau all drafted by the Bills. So good work there by Brandon Beane bringing those guys in. Should be a solid enough defensive line. You just worry about that pass rush there with no marquee name on the outside. Greg Rousseau is probably your number one-on-one pass rusher there. So it's going to be on Sean McDermott. Forgot his name for a second. Ol Al-Qaeda himself. See previous sorts of segments about that to kind of figure out some sort of combination of pass rush ability. No, I don't want to look at Taron Johnson there. I clicked on the wrong thing. Anyway, so that's what the front four is looking like. 3 behind him. Got Matt Milano, a weak side linebacker, coming back off of an injury. Terrell Bernard as the middle linebacker, and Nicholas Morrow as the strong side linebacker. Solid enough. No one's jumping off the page there, but they just got solid players. Matt Milano, really solid player if he can come back looking like he did before his injury. Terrell Bernard really stepped on the scene last year. Nicholas Morrow, probably the weak spot there, but overall just a solid 3 linebackers, solid front 7 overall. Sean McDermott, it was a wizard last year in calling the defense, so I assume he's going to be making some magic once again this year. Overall, just not going to flash off the page. There's no marquee name of those front 7, but it's a good group. It's a good enough group to make some noise. Not really a top 10 sort of group based on the names, but right there in the top half of the league, right there in the low teens. I would put this front 7. On the back end, going to have some players that are looking to prove themselves. So you got Rasul Douglas at left cornerback. He got traded from the Packers, played really well with the Bills last season when he came over. Taron Johnson at the nickelback. Christian Benford at the right cornerback. He's going to have to step up in a big way. Played well last season, but he's going to have to continue that trend going forward. And then at safety is the big question mark. You got Taylor Rapp starting at strong safety, who played very well last year in spurts, and Mike Edwards coming straight off of the free agency, signing a low-dollar contract and being slotted in at the starting free safety. Right behind him is their second-round pick out of Utah, Cole Bishop, though. So look for some possible movement there. I think the secondary, there's some question marks for sure, but I think they kind of trimmed the fat with the players that they let go. Jordan Poyer was a little bit over the hill. Micah Hyde could not stay on the field at all. Obviously, Tre'Davious White, shell of his former self, coming off the ACL and then had the Achilles as well. Just not the same player anymore. So really, they just trim fat on the outside, on the back end. I like this group better than what they were last year, honestly, and I didn't think that would be the case coming in. But obviously, cornerbacks are going to have to step up this year. Rasul Douglas is going to have to step up in a big way. Christian Benford going to have to step up in a big way. Kaiir Elam, the third corner behind Rasul Douglas, really going to have to step up in a big way. Former first-round pick. People are hearing good things from him out of OTAs. We'll see what happens when they put the pads on, but they're going to need him to step up in a big way if they don't want to get burned on the outside. Overall, I'd put the back end right on that same sort of caliber as the front 7, honestly. There's no name that jumps off the page where you're like, we got a game plan for that guy in particular on the defensive side of the ball, but all just solid all around. The only real question mark is free safety. That probably keeps them more towards the middle of the pack. But if Mike Edwards or Cole Bishop steps up in a big way, if Sean McDermott can utilize those players to the best of their abilities, I think this is really a solid group. This could be a fringe top 10 unit, looking on like just on the outside, looking in maybe. I don't think they're going to wow anyone. I don't think they're going to be top 5 dominant sort of unit, but I think they're going to be a solid defense this year. And maybe the yardage doesn't look as good because the offense might be putting them out in front for some games. You're playing a lot of prevents, 3 high in the fourth quarter, all that sort of stuff. But overall, I think as far as the skill of the players and the skill of the play caller on the defensive side of the ball, I like this unit, man. I don't think they're going to be flashy. I don't really think they're going to be a top 10 unit, but I think they're just going to be right on the outside looking in. I like the composition of the Bills overall as a team, especially with Josh Allen at quarterback. Now, if you had like an average replacement level quarterback, I think this would probably be just about an average team. Maybe you're looking at 9-8, 8-9. You slot Josh Allen in there, and this team could be a real contender. So, with that said, best case scenario I see for the Bills this year, I think they could go 12-5. I think they got the pieces in place, they got the quarterback in place, good weapons, good running back room, solid defense, average offensive line play. That's all you need. You get lucky in a couple games. Aren't going to win them all, but 12-5, well within the range here. They should very easily be in the running for the division, even if they don't necessarily win the whole damn thing. Worst case scenario, 9-8 in my mind. I think they're still going to be a winning team no matter what. But say, the back end doesn't really hold up the way that we expect it to. Maybe the offensive line is worse than I give it credit for. Maybe the front seven doesn't quite hold up as well as I'm expecting. Maybe Sean McDermott doesn't necessarily have the greatest year calling the defense as a follow-up to last year where he did very, very well. It's a long season. It's an oblong ball that bounces weirdly when it hits the turf. So weird things can happen. They could lose some close games. Still don't think they're going to be finishing under 500 in any scenario that does not include a Josh Allen injury. And I'm just going to knock on wood there. Really just for all of these. We're assuming a lack of quarterback injury, and we're just going to keep knocking on wood at that lack of quarterback injury. We don't want injuries in this whole thing, and it would muddy the waters if we predicted injuries. So that's where we're at right now. My prediction for the Buffalo Bills, I think 10-7. I think 10-7 this year. I think they're going to have some struggles here and there, but overall, I think they're going to be good enough to be a playoff team. I think they're a team that might start a little slow, but finish strong down the stretch. And if they get in the postseason, which I expect them to at 10-7, I think they could be real dangerous. They're going to have to go on a lot of road games if they finish 10-7, but I think they're going to be real dangerous down the stretch, and I think they could really make some noise in the postseason. I just think there's going to be some ups and downs throughout this year. So 10-7, that is my prediction for them. So moving on from there, what do we got next? We have got the Miami Dolphins, the Dolphins. Let me just pull up their draft here right quickly dickly. Okie doke. So, first and foremost, the Dolphins, controversial player. Many people had him as a second-round pick, but they took him, back into the first round. Chop Robinson, age out of Penn State, didn't have great sack numbers. Some film experts looked at his film, didn't love what they saw as far as the repertoire of pass rush moves, but a great athlete. I think he ran like a 4.48 or something at the combine. Really good athletic numbers, kind of undersized, but really solid speed rusher. That's kind of the mold we're looking for. He'll be in a rotational role behind Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, of course, unless one of them doesn't look the same coming off of those injuries. We'll get to that in just a second, though. So that's one player that should be an impact player coming out of the draft for him. Patrick Paul, offensive tackle out of Houston. They're going to need this guy because there's a good chance he's going to be playing at some point. Teron Armstead, who knows how long he's going to last throughout the season. He's had storied injury troubles, contemplated retirement, ultimately decided to come back for this season to make all of that money that he was given in free agency a couple years back. You don't know if he's going to stay healthy. If he doesn't, a guy like Patrick Paul, offensive tackle out of Houston, is going to be pivotal in their rotation this year. He may even end up starting at right tackle for all I know, because this Dolphins offensive line is not great, and they weren't really great last season, and all they really did was lose talent. But again, we'll get to that here in just a second. They draft Jalen Wright, running back out of Tennessee, in the 4th round. Really good player, still the 3rd string running back, I would say, behind Mostert, A-Chain. Then you got Jalen Wright there at the 3rd string. Love them sticking on brand, though. Love them sticking on brand. Just fast running backs who you just put in Mike McDaniel's scheme and you just say, go. I love I love the commitment to the bit of just getting every fast player known to man on that football team. So Jalen Wright fits that mold. I don't know how much he's going to play, but really deep backfield there with the Miami Dolphins with Jalen Wright added to that. And they still have Jeff Wilson on the roster. I don't think they're going to keep all 4 of those running backs. I think one of those guys is going to be left out in the cold, likely here as we get into nut cutting time, or roster cutting time, as it's more colloquially known. Colloquially is a hard word, by the way. I don't want to get myself off on a tangent, but yeah. So love that. Love their backfield. We'll get to that here in just a moment. Mohamed Kamara, Colorado State edge. They drafted him in the 5th round, and then from there, you're just getting into muddy waters of players that could be impactful if given the opportunity, but 5th or 6th or 7th round guys, you're not necessarily expecting a whole lot of. So that is the draft. Let's take a look at the roster going down the list here. So obviously at quarterback, we got Haktua Tongavailoa. Shout out to that girl on Twitter in Nashville. Just lighting the world on fire. Good luck in the future. That's all I got to say. Good luck in the future. Hope you cash in on this now. You got White Mike as the backup. Hopefully you won't need him, but to his injury history, you never know. You absolutely never know. Running back, as I alluded to there briefly, just a deep running back room. I mean, Raheem Mostert, number 1, Devon Achane, number 2, Achane. I still don't really understand or know how his name is pronounced, but he's a monster. One of my favorite players coming out of the draft last year, and he averaged like 8 yards per carry and some change last year when he was on the field. An absolute freak, one of the fastest guys in the league. The second he stepped foot on the football field. And then you got Jalen Wright at the 3rd string, Jeff Wilson Jr. as the 4th string. One of the deepest backfields in the entire NFL. Just an embarrassment of riches they got back there, and all of them are pretty manageable salaries too. Like they're all kind of guys that aren't at the top end of the running back market, but all really solid players in my mind. Love this backfield. Love this backfield. Then you look at the wide receiver core. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, one of the best wide receivers in the entire league, right up there with Justin Jefferson as the best wide receiver in the entire league. Jalen Waddle, completing that 1-2 tandem that is the fastest in NFL history. Really solid there. Then you bring in Odell Beckham Jr. off the street in free agency. Spent a solid season last year with the Ravens, filling in that number 3 wide receiver role again this year with the Miami Dolphins. I think he's going to play that role very well. Braxton Berrios is the 4th receiver, and you got River Craycraft and 6th string guy Malik Washington, 6th round pick out of Virginia, I believe it was. And there you go. There's your wide receiver core. You throw in Jonnu Smith, Durham Smythe as the tight ends. Yeah, tight end, you take it or leave it. I think Jonnu Smith's going to be an upgrade blocking wise from what they've had the previous couple years. Durham Smythe also a solid blocker, though, which you need to be in that Mike McDaniel style of the Shanahan running scheme. So overall, tight end's kind of replacement level, but that wide receiver core is, just about as good as they come. If Tua can get the ball out there quick, it's been the story over the last several years, and it will continue to be the story. I think you could see another great offensive year, especially with the wide receivers they have. Top 10 at the very worst wide receiver core. I think that 1, 2, 3 of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Odell Beckham Jr. You're going to have a hard time finding a better 1, 2, 3 throughout the league. Really solid receiving core. Don't even include the tight end in that. Even with the replacement level at tight end coming with Jonnu Smith and Durham Smythe, I'd still put the wide receiver core of the Dolphins ahead of the wide receiver core of the Bills, just because they got the names. They got the names, baby. Even Odell Beckham Jr. at this stage in his career, he's not that great number 1 player he once was. Still a really solid football player. Still got a good couple years left in the tank, I would say. So you pair him with 2 stars at the very top in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You got some magic, man. The skill positions for the Dolphins are about as good as they come. It just, it gets a little awkward when you start talking about the offensive line. So where we're at right now with the offensive line, obviously, Alec Ingold, solid fullback. He's not the problem here. Offensive line, though. Left tackle, Teron Armstead. Behind him, Patrick Paul, the guy that I just talked about, 2nd round pick out of Houston. maybe needing him at some point. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it. Left guard, Isaiah Wynn, former tackle. You move him inside, kind of bounced around from team to team here in recent years. Center is Aaron Brewer, who's been okay. It's not been bad, but not the greatest center in the world. Robert Jones at right guard, taking over for a different Robert Hunt, who got paid buku bucks to go to the Panthers this past offseason. So replacement level there with Robert Hunt. We'll see how Robert Jones looks in that new spot. Can't really help but be a downgrade at that point, though. Robert Hunt is one of the better guards in the entire league. So really, no matter what, they're going to be a downgrade, and it was already not a great offensive line last year. And you got Austin Jackson at the right tackle, who I believe was there last season. See if he gets some, I don't know, a little bit of progression, I guess you could say, from him this year. This offensive line isn't great. I mean, basically, if Teron Armstead's not there, this is, probably, very, very, at the very best, a bottom half of the league sort of group. And the worst, I would say, bottom 10. They're really not a very good offensive line. And I'd say what's holding back the offense when it gets to postseason, when you need that running game, you're going up against a vaunted front seven like the Chiefs, for instance. You're in minus 27-degree wind chill weather. Hard to toss the ball around in that. You need to rely on the running game. It's hard to rely on the running game if your offensive line is just getting absolutely dominated at every turn. And I don't know that story is going to be any different this time around. I just don't believe in this offensive line, especially if Teron Armstead's not there. If Teron Armstead's there, hey, maybe you just run behind Teron Armstead, rely on your all-pro left tackle to kind of make some space for you. If he's not there, who's to say what Patrick Paul is going to be? Everyone else outside of Teron Armstead, not that great on the offensive line. This is the biggest worrying point for me, really for the Dolphins as a team. Just the offensive line, I just don't believe in them very much. It's the one thing holding the offense back. I don't think it's going to catch up to them in the regular season. I think they're going to have a really solid output in the regular season as they did last year and really the year before. Inconsistent the year before. At this point, you're just relying on Mike McDaniel in year 3 as a play caller to continue to improve. He made a big leap last year, especially integrating the run game in creative ways, not straying away from it, not forgetting about the run game like he did sometimes in year 1. In year 3, you're just hoping for even more of a progression in that direction to kind of make up for a lack of great offensive line play. I mean, hell, the 49ers haven't had a great offensive line outside of... Trent Williams. I don't know how I forgot Trent Williams' name there for a second. Outside of Trent Williams, they haven't had a great offensive line there for a while. But you kind of need a guy like Trent Williams there. You at least need one star on the offensive line, right? Because even without Trent Williams in there, still got Christian McCaffrey, still got all those weapons. They were struggling to run the ball last season when Trent Williams went down to the 49ers. So I don't know. You're going to need Teron Armstead to stay healthy, and even then, still might not be enough. That's a big worry for me. I think overall, if we're just talking regular season, shoo-in for a top 10 offense. No question in my mind the Dolphins are going to be good in the regular season. It's if and when they get to the postseason, that's where the worries start for me. And especially with what they lost on the defensive side of the ball, which we'll get to here in just a second. I don't know. I'm not incredibly high on this Dolphins team on the whole, unless Mike McDaniel comes out there and is just magical as a play caller, which is totally possible for sure. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, though, aforementioned, lost some players here on the front seven. Obviously, Zach Sealer is still around. Neville Gallimore, he's there. And then you bring in Calais Campbell in a late free agency signing, which I think he's going to be really solid. I think of those 3 players I just named, I think him and Zach Sealer are probably going to be anchors there on the interior. I really think Calais Campbell's still got some good football left in him, and Zach Sealer is an underrated defensive lineman when it comes to stopping the run, especially, which is something that I think they really need to focus on with that defensive line. You lose Christian Wilkins, though, and it's simply not going to be the same. There's no way around it. You're not going to be as good of a run defense without Christian Wilkins in there, because he's maybe the best run-stopping defensive tackle in the entire league. And that Raiders defensive line, boy, I can't wait to get to them. That's going to be a fun group. But for the Dolphins, what is left behind? You're just hoping that Anthony Weaver I believe it was Anthony Weaver they hired, coming over from the Baltimore Ravens, associate head coach there. Now he goes down to the Miami Dolphins. You're just hoping for a little bit of that magic that the Ravens had last season. A lot of it was Mike McDonald, as people usually say. But you're just hoping that Anthony Weaver is, a solid enough guy coming off of that Ravens coaching tree. John Harbaugh is really good at identifying coaching talent. That's kind of been his MO for the entire time he's been in Baltimore. That's kind of what you're hoping for there, with kind of making up for what you're losing on the defensive line. Behind them, still got Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb coming back. Jalen Phillips coming off an Achilles. Bradley Chubb coming off of an ACL, I believe it was. No guarantee that either of those players are going to be the same guys coming back. But at the very least behind them, you got first-round pick Chop Robinson, not Josh Robinson, Chop Robinson, coming out of Penn State, who I mentioned before. Interested to see how he fits into the rotation. Might be thrust into a bigger role if either Phillips or Chubb isn't quite the player they were before their season-ending injury last year. Interested to see what Shaq Barrett has left in the tank. He got cut from, I believe, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe it was the Eagles. I think it was actually the Eagles this past season. He's kind of in the twilight of his career. He's got maybe 1 or 2 years left. We'll see if he can, get some good contributions with the Dolphins. But some solid names there on the outside. It's just a lot of age and very long in the tooth, with the exception of Chop Robinson. So I'm interested to see. I'm a little bit. The jury is still out on how the pass rush is going to look this year. You're relying on a lot of injuries, and a lot of young players and players in the twilight of their career to kind of expend whatever is left in the tank for this upcoming season. So. Jury's out on that, but we'll circle back around to that in season whenever we see what they look like on the football field. As far as the interior linebackers, you got David Long Jr., who came over in free agency. Exceptional pickup by them. He played really well with the Titans last year. And then you got Anthony Walker Jr., who's been a staple of that Cleveland Browns defense for a couple of years. Again, another guy we have to see what's left in the tank, but he played well in spurts with the Cleveland Browns. As far as on the whole of the front seven, I have a hard time placing them in the top half of the league. I don't think they're in the 20s. I don't think they're a bottom 10 unit by any stretch of the imagination, but there's just too much up in the air. You lost too much on the defensive line. There's no guarantees that those pass rushers that you expect to be elite will be elite this year coming off of those injuries. You're relying on draft picks, guys late in their career. You got some solid interior linebackers, but there's just too much going on for me to rank them too high. Again, really the whole front seven, the jury is out. I'm not sure what to expect from them. For right now, I'm putting them kind of lower middle of the pack, though. Somewhere in the mid to late teens is where I think this Dolphins front seven lies. On the back end, you let go of Xavier Howard. Wild offseason for Xavier Howard. Still doesn't have a football team. Don't need to get into all that, but yeah, he's just go Google that on Google. You look that up, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. He's no longer with the team, though, so let's just keep it moving. As far as the secondary, on the outside, you got Kendall Fuller and Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey still maybe not the number one corner in the league anymore, but still really solid cornerback. Really, really good player still. Obviously, safeties, you bring in Jordan Poyer from the Bills. I think that's where he was rumored to go last offseason before he got, I can't remember if he got franchised or if he signed a 1-year deal with the Bills. But now finally ends up with the Miami Dolphins. Javon Holland, one of the best free safeties in the entire league that people still don't talk about enough. He is such a good player, and I think he covers up a lot of holes there on the back end. And then, of course, you got Kader Kohou. Everyone knows Kader Kohou. He's the nickelback on this team. Interesting that ESPN started listing nickelbacks among the starters. I love it. Kind of, keeps up with the times a little bit. Not something they've done in years past, though. So love them kind of changing, adapting to the times a little bit, adding that nickelback in there in the starting lineup. But I feel much better about this secondary than I do about the front seven. I'll just say that much. I think Javon Holland, in particular, is the glue that holds this thing together. I think Jalen Ramsey is maybe not quite a shutdown corner anymore, but still a bona fide number one corner in the league to this day. Between those two, you add in Jordan Poyer, who I think still has some left in the tank. He can play a true strong safety role this year. Just let Javon Holland be a star back there and kind of play off of him. I think Kendall Fuller is kind of a question mark out there, kind of bounced around between teams over the last several years after he was a first-round pick, I believe, with the Tennessee Titans, I want to say. But, behind that, not a whole lot of depth, let's just say. I mean, we got Ciaran Neal and Cam Smith as the corners behind Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller, respectively. But the top end, I think the top end really does well. I think that's something that Anthony Weaver can work with over there with the Miami Dolphins. I think the back end, I think the passing defense is going to be better than it was last year. I think, again, they kind of shed some fat not having Xavier Howard in the lineup anymore. He just wasn't the same player he once was. We'll see if Kendall Fuller can kind of step up and be a reasonable facsimile of what Xavier Howard brought last year. Kind of doubt it, but you got Javon Holland in the back end. You got a number one corner with Jalen Ramsey. This is, high teens. Or 11 to 13 range. I don't think they're quite one of the best secondary groups in the entire league. But I think by the end of the season, we could definitely be talking about this as a top 10 secondary unit, especially if Anthony Weaver turns out to be as we expect. Coming in as that new defensive coordinator, maybe an upgrade over Vic Fangio, probably a little bit better relationships with, at the very least, Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey made no bones about not liking what Vic Fangio was about last year with the Miami Dolphins. Overall, though, I think we're looking at a defense that I think they'll finish better than they did last year. I think they finished in the 20s last year. Not a very good defense at all. This time around, I think that we're going to be looking more about top half of the league. I think somewhere in the 11 to 16 range, you're going to find this unit. I think Anthony Weaver is going to step in and do a solid job. I think they're going to struggle on the front seven a little bit. I'm still not entirely sure about that pass rush. And if the pass rush turns out to be, Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips coming back being the exact same players they were before injury, you could see this team, creep into the top 10, which would be a big time win for this entire team of the Miami Dolphins, especially with how just bereft of talent they were at the end of last year. But that's just kind of where I'm at with them right now. I don't want to set the expectations too high. I think they're going to be good, not great this year is where I'm looking at with the Miami Dolphins. So with all of that put together, where do I have the Dolphins? I think their best case scenario, 11-6. I think they could finish the exact same as they did last year. If that defense steps up, if Anthony Weaver shows up as advertised, secondary plays well, pass rush lives up to what they were last year. The greatness of the receiving group and the backfield and, the solid play of Tua Tagovailoa, elevates them over the lapses in talent on the offensive line. Teron Armstead stays healthy, Lord willing. I think you could have, solid top 10 pushing top 5 offense and a solid maybe top 10 sort of defense back into the top 10 at that. But 11-6, I think this team could be still very good in the regular season, and we'll see about the postseason. Still, again, offensive line not feeling great about them. Worst case scenario, though, 8-9. Could very easily see 8-9. And here's the recipe for doing it. Offensive line ends up being terrible. Teron Armstead, unfortunately, can't stay healthy. Rookie steps in there, isn't quite what you expected him to be coming out of Houston. And it's just a full shambles. You can't get running game going. It's hard to get passing game going because, Tua doesn't have any time. I could see that the offensive line being just that bad. And then on the other side, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, maybe they don't come back. Maybe they've lost a step from what they once were. Maybe Calais Campbell isn't quite the player that I thought he was going to be coming in. And Zach Sealer is kind of just hanging on for dear life there in the front three. And on the back end, I still think worst case scenario, you're still going to have a good back end, but maybe Christian Fuller is not quite, it's Christian Fuller, I apologize, is not quite the player that you're hoping that he is, pair opposite of Jalen Ramsey. Maybe they finish in the late teens instead of the early teens into the top 10. At that point, You're looking at an 8-9 season, probably missing the playoffs. So there's a good bit of range here between 11-6, 8-9 for the Miami Dolphins. For me, I got them right there at 10-7, right there with the Buffalo Bills. I think the offensive line is not going to be great. I think they're going to be a bad unit, but they're going to be good enough to keep Tua upright. I think Tua is going to be able to, like he did last year in the regular season, distribute to the players on the outside. I think the defense is going to be solid enough. I think they're going to, maybe give up some games here and there, especially, you play Josh Allen in the division, maybe probably split that series in the season. Maybe they lose a game to the Patriots, Jets, all that sort of stuff. That's kind of where I see them, though. 10-7. I think they're going to be making a playoff push when it's all said and done. We'll see if they make it. But I don't really see them having another 11-6 year. I just think demonstrably, maybe not demonstrably, but clearly this is a worse roster than what they had last season. You added Odell Beckham, but across the board, I just don't think you have as good a personnel as you did last year outside of that offensive skill room. So that's where I see him. 10-7 for the Miami Dolphins. We're already like nearly 50 minutes into this thing, or a little bit over 50 minutes, based on how long I'm taking that cut for earlier. So we're just going to hit this thing speed round. I'm going to try and breeze through this here real quick. So up next, we're getting into the bottom half of the division from last season, at least what the division standings were. So right now, we have got the New York Jets coming off of a disappointing season. Aaron Rodgers tears his Achilles on the first series of the season, and it's just all ogre from there. I mean, you got Zach Wilson proving once again he is not a franchise quarterback. Just a cavalcade of terrible quarterback play coming in after Zach Wilson. Defense is still great, and by God, Robert Saleh has yet to give them help once. Just a disappointing year, but maybe it would have been different if Aaron Rodgers is in there. It's kind of where I'm leading this year, though. So, looking at the draft, you pick up Olu Fashanu. I think it's Fashanu. I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce his name. I'm not sure he's even going to start day one. He's slided behind, not Teron Armstead, Tyron Smith over there at left tackle. Again, injury concerns coming into this year. He always seems to get hurt in some way, shape, or form. You hope it doesn't happen, but you can't guarantee that, especially at this advanced stage of Tyron Smith's career. But kind of speaks to the depth on the offensive line that the Jets put together this offseason. And credit to them, credit to Joe Douglas for recognizing the biggest need on this team, especially with an aging quarterback. So Olu Fashanu, he's going to find his way into the lineup at some point. It's just a matter of where he fits in on that offensive line. I'm fascinated to see how that all works out. They draft Malachi Corley in the third round, Western Kentucky wide receiver, one of those not great wide receivers, but one of those big time wide receivers in a deep class this year. I think he's going to find a way into the mold, into the rotation there to get some good snaps. But they have a solid wide receiver group, especially with what they brought in. Kind of getting ahead of myself, but there we go. Fourth round pick, we got Braylon Allen, just one of my favorite physical freaks from his college career. Just one of the most jacked humans alive. I mean, 20 years old, one of the biggest backs in the entire league already. He's a true, just 240-pound back, bruiser right there behind Breece Hall in the backfield. Really big thunder and lightning duo that they've got working there. Not sure how he's going to work out of the backfield. Didn't have the greatest hands at Wisconsin, but they didn't also really utilize his hands at Wisconsin. So big question mark there. But I think he's going to provide some juice when you get into short yardage situations. He's going to keep the chains moving, I think. I like Braylon Allen for this team. Then you got Jordan Travis in the fifth round. He'll be the backup quarterback in all likelihood. We'll see how he looks coming back from that just gruesome injury he had that ended his season with Florida State and really ended Florida State's season by proxy. And that's pretty much of the players that were drafted, those are probably the biggest contributors. Maybe you see South Dakota State running back Isaiah Davis. They also drafted him in the fifth round. Maybe he makes his way into the rotation. I think he's clearly behind Braylon Allen, though, unless something unforeseen happens. So there you go. There is the draft for them. What I'm looking at here as far as the depth chart. So obviously Aaron Rodgers coming back off that Achilles injury. He's the starting quarterback. No guarantee he's going to be the player that we expect him to be. He's 40, 41 at this point. So again, big time injury coming back off that Achilles. No guarantee he's going to be great. But it's just a big wait and see. If he is even average compared to what he once was, he'll still be a top 10 player. still be a top 10 quarterback at the very least, and he's still going to make a big-time impact. So that's really the biggest measuring stick as to where I see this Jets team going. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to come back and be really solid this year. I think he's got maybe 2 years left in the tank before he rides off into the sunset and runs in the next election with RFK Jr. Sorry about that. The original RFK is dead, so I apologize to that man. Dead name and his pops. But I believe in him. Breece Hall there at running back starting still. Braylon Allen at the second string, and then you've got Isaiah Davis there at the third string. Not quite on the level of the Miami Dolphins, but still solid top to bottom. I think Breece Hall is better than Raheem Mostert. I'll just put it that way. And I think Braylon Allen plays a really solid role. So I love the makeup of this backfield. And I really, in combination with their offensive line, I like the setup of this running game more than I like what the Dolphins have put together. The Dolphins might have better numbers just because Mike McDaniels is that good of a play caller, and his offensive scheme, especially running-wise, is that good. But as far as the players, I like this Jets team a little bit better in the running game than I like the Miami Dolphins. Looking at wide receiver now, obviously, Garrett Wilson, the number one. He's one of the best wide receivers in the entire league. I think if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy this year, you're going to see an explosion from Garrett Wilson in year, 3, 4 now? He's coming up on a contract year, I believe, this year. So big season for Garrett Wilson. I think he is going to play very, very well this season. At the number 2, you got Mike Williams coming off of being cut by the Chargers. The Jets pick him up in free agency, so now you have got a solid 1-2 punch between him and Garrett Wilson. Xavier Gipson came on strong last season. He's your number 3 wide receiver. Malachi Corley, your number 4. Allen Lazard, the number 5. And then Jason Brownlee, number 6. Not quite on that level of the Miami Dolphins. I would compare this favorably to what the Bills have, though. I think in combination with Aaron Rodgers, he's not quite the quarterback that Josh Allen is right now, but he's right up there. He's right up there as far as a quarterback play, and I think he's going to come back and play well this season. You combine that, you have a true number 1 wide receiver, what the Bills simply don't have with Garrett Wilson. Mike Williams is a good number 2 to have. My nose just keeps on itching. I apologize to all the people watching. I'm fidgeting like a son of a bitch. That's what happens when you just mainline caffeine for an entire day, and that's pretty much the only thing you put into your body. I apologize. I apologize for that. I'm acting weird, but it is what it is. You got Tyler Conklin, who's, solidly a little bit above average tight end. I say underrated as a receiver. I think he plays very well in ways that he doesn't get credit for at wide receiver. Really going back to when he was with the Vikings, I think he's a really solid receiving option at tight end. Really that 1-2 solid third option there with Xavier Gipson. I like this receiving core. I like the makeup of this passing game, and especially, obviously, Nick Bawden. I apologize to that man. I have no idea who he is at fullback, but I hope nothing but success for that man. As far as the offensive line, this is where I see the biggest improvement year over year. You got Tyron Smith at left tackle, Olu Fashanu right behind him, just in case something happens. Lord willing, he doesn't. But then you got John Simpson at left guard, who they brought in free agency. Joe Tippmann at center, solid enough center. Not the biggest name in the world, not flashy in any way, shape, or form, but good enough to kind of shore up the middle there. Elijah Vera Tucker coming back off of an injury. He's a really good right guard. I mean, one of the better guards in the entire league when he is healthy. And then in right tackle, you got Morgan Moses, who you brought in free agency as well. Just a night and day sort of shift from what the Jets had last season. It was a shambles last season with what they had in the offensive line. And credit to Joe Douglas, he went into free agency and knew exactly what they had to do with an aging quarterback. Didn't bow to pressure to take another receiver in the first round. Didn't bow to the pressure to take Brock Bowers, like I'm sure Aaron Rodgers wanted him to do. Took another offensive lineman to continue to build that depth. And now all of a sudden, what was a weakness last year is a legitimate, I'd say strength for him coming up in this upcoming season, especially with how good Breece Hall is at running the rock. If you give Aaron Rodgers time, he's going to dice up a secondary still. That arm is never going away in my estimation. So you add in this offensive line. If Aaron Rodgers is just just a reasonable facsimile of what he's been throughout the entirety of his career. Maybe he's lost a step after the Achilles, no pun intended, but he's still a really solid player. I think this offense could very easily be a back end of the top 10 sort of unit. I really like the makeup of this group. I think Breece Hall is a star. I think Garrett Wilson is a star. I think the offensive line is going to be a big-time strength for him this year. I think they're going to get good push in the running game in ways that they can lean on this year, maybe take some load off of Aaron Rodgers' back. And I just think with Aaron Rodgers piloting this thing, he's a weird son of a bitch. Has all sorts of concerns about off-the-field stuff all around him. But by God, when he's on the field, he's one of the most electric players in all of football. And even if he isn't quite as electric as he once was, I think he's still going to be a top 10 sort of quarterback. So that's why I think this is a back end of the top 10 sort of unit. I don't think they're a top 5 unit by any stretch of the imagination. They're going to move the ball this year if Aaron Rodgers is a solid quarterback. And make no mistake about it. And with that, I mean, let's look at the defense. Less than zero, we are -1 concern about the defense. If there's one thing that Robert Saleh can do, is he can put together one hell of a defensive unit. And I mean, we just go down the list here. I mean, Jermaine Johnson is a freak there on the defensive line. Javon Kinlaw, former first-round pick, they're bringing in free agency. Quinnen Williams, one of the best defensive tackles in the entire league. And you got Solomon Thomas just waiting there in the wings, which tells you just how deep this defensive line is. And then behind that, did they get it even better on the outside? Actually, yes, they did. Hassan Reddick, right defensive end. Russian opposite of Jermaine Johnson. He was a fantastic player for all the years he was in Philadelphia. He's expected to do the exact same thing here with the New York Jets. Great pass rusher, especially pairing him opposite of Jermaine Johnson, who was emerging over the last couple of seasons. Then you look at the linebackers. Jamie and Sherwood, I apologize to that man. I have no idea who that is. But C.J. Mosley, Quincy Williams. Maybe the most underrated linebacker duo in the entire league. You sum that all up, that's an elite front seven. Top 5 front seven that is going to dominate each and every week. And again, this is what we said about the Jets for the last several seasons. They've got a star, at least one star at every single level. They got multiple in the defensive line with Quinnen Williams and Hassan Reddick, with Jermaine Johnson, frankly, not far behind him. And then right behind him, you got 2 stars once again between C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams. It's just such a stacked front seven. And hey, you think you're going to get some sort of respite on the back end? No, sir. Au contraire, mon frere, because you got probably the best cornerback in the league right now in Sauce Gardner on the outside. Got DJ Reed, who is maybe the best second corner in the entire league, opposite of him. Tony Adams at safety, we'll see how that works out, but you bring in Chuck Clark in free agency, coming off a dynamic year with the Ravens in that Mike McDonald defense. Michael Carter, the second nickelback. What a Freudian slip right there. My favorite nickelback, I'll tell you that right now. Michael Carter, the second. Not to be confused with Michael Carter Jr., who is both a running back formerly of the Jets and a guard for several teams in the NBA. Didn't quite work out how we were hoping for with Michael Carter Jr., but I digress on that front. This secondary between Chuck Clark, DJ Reed, and last but certainly not least, Sauce Gardner, one of the best secondaries in the entire league. You pair that with a dynamic and dominant front seven, you composite that all together, this is no question in my mind. At the very worst, they're going to be a top 10 unit this year. Almost a shoo-in for top 5, and for my money, maybe the best defense in the entire league this year. And looking at the composite of the entire team, you pair a defense that I think could be the number 1 in the entire league with an offense that I expect to be fringe top 10, back end of the top 10 sort of team. And best case scenario, I could very easily see the Jets getting 13 wins. 13-4, if they turn out to be as good as I think, like the most optimistic sort of setup there. They're number 1 defense in the league, number 7 offense in the league. We'll just say they're going to dominate teams this year if that ends up being the case. They are a fantastic football team top to bottom. If they just get a semblance of good QB play, they could be off to the races this year. I'll say that right now. Worst case scenario, again, assuming that Aaron Rodgers is healthy, we can't just, caveat. If he's injured, we're going to be seeing roughly the same shit we've been seeing from him. Maybe Tyrod Taylor provides at least a good facsimile of solid QB play. I think he's still one of the more underappreciated backups in the entire league. I think he's still one of the best backups in the entire league to this day, so maybe they won't drop off too much. But even thinking all of that, I'd say worst case scenario for them, it ends up being 10-7 in my mind. I don't see this team floating around 500. I think, hell, even if Aaron Rodgers goes down, you bring in Tyrod Taylor, I think this offense still plays very well, especially with a better offensive line, still really solid backfield that I think they actually upgraded by bringing in Braylon Allen and their fifth-round guy whose name escapes me already. Receiving core, I think, Tyrod Taylor just has to be, right at replacement level in the receiving core to fully kind of, realize a solid offense. Really, all you need is an average defense, or an average offense, rather, anywhere from 11 to 16. And that defense, I have no questions about the defense. The downside for the defense is back into the top 10. I don't see a reality where this Jets defense finishes outside of the top 10, and it boggles my mind to see a reality where they finish outside of the top 5. I mean, maybe some teams pick on some of the weak spots in the back end. That's the only positive sort of spin I can look at it if you were an opposing team. This defense is going to be elite, I would say, almost no matter what. And if you got an elite defense and an average offense, 10-7, just about the worst case scenario I can see for you in my book. My prediction, overall, I predicted them to win the division in the recklessly early predictions, so we're sticking on brand here. I've got them finishing 11-6. I think they win this division. Still, I am interested to see what happens when they face off against the cream of the crop in the NFL this year. I think the Jets could really make a deep playoff run this year. It is a stacked AFC, though. What else is new? So it's going to be, the kitchen is hot in the AFC right now. There's so many good teams. Only 2 of them can make the championship round. Only 1 of them can make the Super Bowl. And they're still all staring up at the Chiefs, who we're going to talk about here in a couple of weeks. But 11-6, I think they win this division. Final team that we're looking at here, we're looking at the lowly New England Patriots. They finished second worst record in the entire league last year. I believe they were 3-14, 4-13, something around that neighborhood. Bad from top to bottom, from start to finish. They were a terrible football team. Great defense, god-awful offense. You get rid of, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Get rid of Bill Belichick after 20-some-odd years of sustained success there up until the last couple. Bring in Gerard Mayo as the new head coach. Bring in Alex Van Pelt, not to be confused with Scott Van Pelt, at the offensive coordinator. Defensive coordinator, you're still sticking within the Belichick tree, all that sort of good stuff. Overall, a lot of room to work with. They had a really bad roster, and they could really only improve. I think they did about as good of a job as you can ask for this offseason, though. Looking at the draft, obviously you take Drake May at number 3 overall. Who's to say he's going to start? I think he's been playing very well in OTAs from all the reports. I maybe he starts day 1. I don't know. I don't think you bring in a guy like Jacoby Brissett and then just immediately sit him on the bench to start Drake May week 1. I think you slow play this one just because of how bad the offensive personnel group is outside of that quarterback position. So I think you probably stick with Jacoby Brissett out of the gate. But Jalen Polk in the second round, he'll be playing right away. Might be the number 1 receiver right off the rip. I think he's going to be a big-time player for them this year. Caden Wallace, offensive tackle out of Penn State, they take in the 3rd round. He's going to be asked to step in right away because that may be the worst offensive line in the entire league last season. Javon Baker, wide receiver out of UCF, they took in the 4th round. He's probably going to be stepping in right away. I think he'll probably slot in there in either the 2nd or 3rd wide receiver. If you'll remember, he had one of the best quotes in all of the draft. I believe he said he makes plays so good that people in wheelchairs stand up. Love it. I never changed Javon Baker. I love everything about what you're putting out there. Then you're looking at offensive guard Layden Robinson in the 4th round of Texas A&M. Again, probably a guy you're going to be asking a lot from here this upcoming season. It's just it's a lot of there's a lot of stuff There's a lot of stuff here. Not a whole lot of talent left over from last season. It's going to be a really, really young roster from top to bottom, which kind of is what you're looking for on a rebuild anyways. It's not going to be pretty this year at times, but I think overall the baseline of talent has improved from what they did last year, really just in the draft alone. And of course, Bazooka Joe Milton, probably your second, third string QB this upcoming season. Definitely third string QB behind Jacoby Brissett and Drake May when it's all said and done. Love him though. I mean, I love that arm. You draft him in the 6th round because he's a project, but man, he's got the most electric arm that I've ever seen. You don't know where it's going on any given down, but electric arm talent there from Joe Milton. And Jaheim Bell, I'm not going to drop this. He's a 7th round pick, and the production kind of goes behind that. He was a highly touted player in the transfer portal last year. Didn't quite live up to billing with his impact on the Florida State offense, but he's just such a versatile athlete. I feel like if Alex Van Pelt has any kind of semblance of creativity, he's going to find a way to get Jaheim Bell involved. I just feel like the 7th round grade in talent, as I itch my nose for the 5 millionth time this episode, the grade in talent for Jaheim Bell, I just feel like as far as an athlete is concerned, you want to get the hands of you want to get the ball in the hands of those athletes. I'm losing steam here at the end of this thing. But you want to get the ball in the hands of those athletes. I just feel like they're going to find a way, kind of use him in sort of a Taysom Hill sort of a joker role, where you line him up at various positions, try to make him a matchup nightmare. I'm not coming off of this hill until he proves to be unable to get on the field. I just feel like Jaheim Bell is an electric enough athlete to where they're going to find a way to get him in there. Overall, I don't think it's going to lead to a playoff spot, but I think the Patriots absolutely nailed this past draft. I mean, credit to Elliott Wolf. I mean, we're talking before any one of them step on the football field in a regular season or preseason game for that matter. But I just feel like they did about as good of a job as you can do with what they were given coming into the offseason, with what they did in the draft. So let's look at the depth chart here real quick. So obviously, right now it looks like Jacoby Brissett is slated as the starter. Drake May the backup. ESPN has Bailey Zappi as the 3rd string. I just don't feel like Bailey Zappi's going to be on this team when it comes to opening day. I feel like he's going to be a cap casualty when it comes to slimming down the roster for the regular season. That's just my read on the situation. I don't think you cut a rookie project quarterback like Joe Milton. Writing's on the wall for Bailey Zappi. Maybe he finds a trade partner sometime during training camp, but I just don't see him on the New England Patriots. As far as the backfield, you bring in Antonio Gibson from free agency, formerly of the Washington Commies, now with the New England Patriots. He's the 2nd string guy behind Ramondre Stevenson, of course. Big, dynamic, physical back. You love to see him. Hopefully he has a better year than he did last year. Woo, excuse me. And kind of a sneaky deep sort of receiving core there coming off of this past season. Again, a lot like the Bills, no real true number 1 receiver. But, I mean, the depth chart is, Kendrick Bourne as the number 1 guy right now. Demario Douglas coming in from free agency. Jalen Polk coming in from the draft. KJ Osborne coming over from the Vikings. Juju Smith-Schuster holdover from last year. And then Javon Baker, who you bring in the draft as well. That's a solid top 6. I mean, much, much better than what they had last year. They have markedly improved in their weapons this year. Again, no true number 1 wide receiver. We'll see if one of those guys emerges this year. But just a solid top to bottom sort of group that is just, has a lot of depth where they simply didn't have it last year. So I love the makeup of this receiving group. It's always a question mark at quarterback, even if Drake May does play. It's just there's no guarantee that he'll step in and be good right away. He was a project coming out anyways as far as the mechanics were concerned. Overall for the offense, we'll look at the offensive line here real quick before we get too ahead of ourselves. Also, Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper as your tight ends. Solid 1-2 there. Hunter Henry, just good all-around player. Hopefully he stays on the field. He's getting a little bit long in the tooth, but when he's on the field, he is a really, really solid player. Looking at the offensive line, though, Chukwuma Okorafor, I believe he comes over from the Steelers. At left tackle, Cole Strange at left guard, Jake Andrews at center, Sidi Sow at right guard, who never heard of in my entire life. Right tackle, Mike Onwenu. And still, you look at that offensive line, and I'm seeing a bottom 10 unit. There's just no two ways around it. I think Cole Strange is not a bad player. I think he's kind of lived up to that first round sort of billing. He's been solid. Outside of him, though, it's just a field of question marks. It's either young guys or it's guys that truly I've never heard of in my entire life. In Sidi Sow and Jake Andrews, don't know who the hell those two are. This offensive line is going to be the main limiting factor for them. I think they got a solid receiving core. I think it's, just solidly average quarterback play, but the offensive line is going to hold them down. And because of that, I think probably looking at, mid-teens at the very, very best, probably in the 20s, I would imagine, for that offensive skill group, or really just the offense as a whole. The offensive line is still very much a work in progress. They are still probably a year away from having a serviceable group there. It's going to be a struggle city over there this coming season. Defensively, though, I'll tell you what, their defense is getting slept on. I mean, this Patriots defense, even with how abysmal that offense was with all their struggles they had last year, and it's honestly better this year than it was last year. That's just how bad their offense was last year. The defense is still every bit as talented as it was the previous, several seasons actually, under the twilight years of Bill Belichick. On the defensive line, you got Keon White coming into his second year. He's going to be slated as the starter at left defensive end. Devon Godchaux, who played very, very well for him. Christian Barmore, who is an underrated star there on the defensive line. Then Matthew Judon coming off of an injury last season. We'll see how he looks coming off of that injury, getting a little long in the tooth. We'll see what he has left in the tank, but I still think he's a solid player. Juwan Bentley, solid inside linebacker. Jelani Tavai, underrated inside linebacker. Josh Uche, rushing opposite of Matthew Judon, underrated sort of pass rusher. Front seven wise, sneaky kind of top 10, maybe, front seven. I think they're not really a whole lot of drop off at all from what they've had over the last several seasons. I really, really like the makeup of this group. And then you look at the back end. Jonathan Jones at left cornerback, solid guy coming back there. Kyle Duggar, one of the best strong safeties in the entire league. Jabril Peppers, solid free safety back there. Christian Gonzalez, before that labrum tear, was playing out of his mind at corner on the outside. Marcus Jones slotting in there at the nickelback. You look at this defense, and I really do. I think they're going to be a top 10 unit this year. Maybe even pushing top 5. I feel like they are going to be better than people give them credit for. They're slept on because the offense is so bad, because their team was so bad the last couple of years, really. Even when they were finishing 8 and 9 the previous year, I believe they ended up finishing 7 and 10, maybe. I can't remember what the actual final end total was for them. But they're just a really, really good defense, and I think it's going to carry them to a lot of wins that maybe people don't see coming. So I think overall, I forgot Chad Ryland was still their place kicker. Boy, that was a tough look. That's a tough look to having drafted him. Ooh, excuse me. Oh, man. Just almost imploded there from a burp. Still feeling the aftershakes from that. But I think best case scenario, y'all ready for this? Even with how bad the offensive line is and how, average at best I think the offense is going to be, I think best case scenario for the Patriots, I think easily finish 9 and 8 this year. It just takes a couple lucky bounces here and there. I think the defense is going to keep them in a whole lot of games this season. You just need a couple plays here and there from the offense, and they can steal some games. I think if they steal enough games, they could very easily finish 9 and 8, and it'd be a great start to the rebuild for Gerard Mayo and co. there. Elliott Wolf really just has to laser focus in on the offensive line the next offseason. They're probably pushing for playoff spot once again. On the flip side of that, though, I could still see a worst case scenario where they're 6-11. I think undisputedly they are a better football team than they were last season, just from the roster standpoint alone. But that offense still scares me, and that offensive line in particular could tank the entire team's hopes and dreams this year for whatever the hopes and dreams are. They don't expect to compete this season. I mean, that's quite obvious. But if the offense is just terrible, if they're just in the mid-20s and the defense is just kind of just dragging the lifeless husk of that offense once again behind them, they're not going to have the firepower to overcome a lot of the teams within their own division. Really, I mean, we're looking at 3 teams in the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills that, if they play up to their potential, could be top 10 units in the league offensively. That could just be one of those things where they simply don't have. Oh, that's disgusting. How long has that booger been there on the side of my nose? Who's to say? A little Easter egg there for the YouTube audience. I apologize for that. Oh, that was disgusting, but here we are. It could very easily be a 6-11 season, though, just because they can't keep up with the teams that are in their division. A great defense, but eventually that defense is going to break if they don't get any help from their offense. It's a tale as old as time. It's a time as old as tale, as I started to say there. My prediction for the season, though, I think they're going to be better than a lot of people think. I think they're going to be an 8-9 football team. I think the offense finishes a little bit of shade under the Mendoza line. I think they're anywhere from 16 to 19. I think when it's all said and done in the offensive statistics, and I think defensively they're going to be a top 10 unit. I really do believe they got everyone coming back pretty much. If Matthew Judon is just kind of a reasonable facsimile of what he once was on the outside, they get good pass rush, good play on the back end there. I just feel like this team is primed to surprise some people. I think they're going to steal some games that people don't expect. I think 8-9. They still probably finish last in the division, but 8-9 is where I see the New England Patriots going. So with that, there you have it. There is the first division preview in the books. I got the Jets winning this division, staying consistent with my recklessly early predictions. Oh my God, I got to get done with this episode so I can just itch my nose with reckless abandon. It is unreal right now how much my nose is itching. It's like I just been mainlining alcohol and I got that puffy red drunk nose. So I do apologize for that. For the video component of this podcast, probably hear it on the audio, I'm itching my nose right now. That's kind of where we're at right now, though. I'm done with this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Unqualified Analysis. Hope you learned something today. If you enjoyed, go ahead, share this with a group of people who you think will enjoy this episode and this show in general. If you liked it, go ahead, subscribe. We're on all sorts of platforms. I'm talking Apple, Spotify, Google Play, even Amazon. We're all over the damn place. So you just go ahead, listen wherever you want to listen. YouTube, how could I forget YouTube? Go ahead, listen where you want to listen. Subscribe, share it with a friend. Help me grow this damn thing a little bit. If you want to follow me on the socials, it's at CalebVUA on the Twitters. Pretty much the only places that I'm active is Twitter. That's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you want to contact the show, shoot me a DM on Twitter. My DMs are open. Probably the best way to get in touch with me. If you want to go a little bit the old-fashioned way, though, head on over to the email. That's unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. That'll be in that link will be in the description. Same thing with the Twitter. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in to Unqualified Analysis. As always, I've got no clue what I am talking about. One thing I learned this week, though. In 532, the people of the Eastern Roman Empire were extremely unhappy with how Emperor Justinian was running the government. So they were so fired up about it that they showed up at the Hippodrome for the horse races hosted by Justinian, the emperor, threw insults at him for about 20 straight races, then broke out into a massive riot that killed tens of thousands of people, and burnt half of Constantinople, including the Hagia Sophia. It is the single deadliest riot in sports history. Tens of thousands of people with this riot there for the horse races in 532. Bet you didn't know that one. I didn't until I heard it. So there you go. You're learning something new every day. I'm going to go edit this thing, get it up as soon as I can. Y'all have a good week. I'll see you next Tuesday for the NFC East. How about that? See ya.